Welcome to Talk Design Podcast, the space where creativity meets conversation. I'm Adrian Ramsey, your host, and as someone deeply entrenched in the world of design, I'm thrilled to introduce you to the minds that inspire me, in the hope that they will spark something special within you too. From a design past crafting women's swimwear to pushing the boundaries of performance sportswear, from mountaineering to international yachting, to implementing systematic innovation solutions that transcend boundaries in aerospace industry. My heart remains rooted in architecture, and exploring the emotional tapestry woven by built spaces is my fascination. My journey in design has been what can only be described as a life of design. I want to thank you for lending me your ears. I'm eager to embark on this next episode together. My guest on Talk Design today is Daniel Lowe. Now, Daniel is from Forsite Studio in Austin, Texas, and I feel like we should have recorded everything we've said so far. We didn't. We're going to start the recording now because otherwise it'll be next Tuesday and we'll still be sitting here chatting about stories about Austin and stories about, different parts and what's happening with architecture. So Daniel, you do design build. And that's something I really love. And also you've worked in so many different climate zones. That's something I really appreciate because I try and do my work internationally. And so I need somebody who understands stuff. Welcome to Talk Design, man.
Well, thank you, Adrian. Thank you for having me. Honored to be here.
I'm so looking forward to sharing, just the stuff we've been laughing about and all the rest with the audience. I like to start out with this kind of little backstory. Now, I know that your family came from, Scandinavia, and somehow they landed you in Minnesota, and they never let you shave as a kid because you've got that great big beard. So if you're not on YouTube and you want to see, like, Daniel has a beard that would rival anybody's beard, and it looks like he's just come out of Finland or somewhere. So do have a look. So tell me, so you're a kid in Minnesota. Don't tell me how you got to Austin yet. Tell me what it was like growing up as a kid. Was one of your parents an architect? Like, how did you even think this stuff up?
No, great question. Yeah, I grew up kind of rural Minnesota, and I think one of the main reasons that I'm an architect was my father. This is like late 1970s, early 1980s, decides he's gonna build his own house, and it's not just any house. This is like a earth sheltered house, right? And so, poured in place concrete walls, and then it's mounted up on the sides and on the top with earth, right?
Wow.
And so in Minnesota, you don't get too much southern light, right? So it's all the southern face. It's pretty much just all windows. And then on the I guess on the east and the west, it's kind of mounted up, and then on the north side, it's again some more glass. And there was nothing in our around that was like this, right? But from an energy perspective, I mean, it was fantastic, right? Just all natural insulator all around you, great quality of light. And no, my father is not an architect at all. Kind of just a jack of all trades. This is just something that that he took on, but it was kind of a seed and that it was probably planted in me, and that really I think that's what was inspired me to keep going. And ultimately went to the university in Minnesota from there for architecture school. But just a wonderful climate in the summertime. It's just beautiful. And, if you're from there, you don't know how bad the winters are really, right? That's just all you know. So there's not a ton of people moving there, but by the same token, if you're from there, it's wonderful, So, but it was great to work in that climate zone, certainly professionally as well. Just the challenges of it, and then kind of after that, I spent some time in New York City, kind of working at a more corporate architecture, doing towers, let's say in Moscow, right, and doing stuff in Turkey and kind of. Yeah, so this was kind of, early 2000s. And yeah, with this, some of the stuff we were working on, this was like, the tallest towers, at least in Russia at the time. But I think for me, like while it was a great learning experience, and I think everyone should, every architect should try that out. For me, it was kind of abstract, It was just I wasn't high enough on the totem pole where I was actually traveling to, Moscow and some of these places. And I needed something maybe a little more tactile, a little more, hands on, something to kind of roll up your sleeves and go do it, or at least go to the site and check it out and do that. So,
So, do you think
yeah.
that your father's escapade into designing and create building his own home or your own home,
Yeah.
it was your home
Yeah.
too?
Yeah.
I mean, certainly. Well, I've got a question with that. Like, when you go back to that moment, how does
Yeah.
it make you? Is your dad still alive?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how does it make you feel that ultimately, maybe his kind of like, I'm going to do something different. Just the feeling between you and your dad that it sparked this amazing
Mhm.
journey for you to, drawing ventilation ducts or something on the Tower of Moscow.
I think there's something certainly like this desire to do something that hasn't been done before.
Mm.
Certainly, I don't. There wasn't a blueprint that he was going off of, at least that I know. I was
Yeah.
pretty young at the time, also, but I think it was the desire to have something unique, and also, the challenge to see if you can pull it off. And I
Yeah,
think
right.
that is probably a big reason of why I'm in the design build profession today, right? Is there's an immense satisfaction with actually being in the
Yeah.
field on the job site, minding the details, and it's a steep learning curve, right? But it's also incredibly empowering, once you have done a few of these,
Yeah.
or have it under your belt.
I, I
So
I think of your dad as like, like without it, you probably, well, maybe you would have never trusted yourself to do it. He put you into an environment. Bless your mother. I mean, but he put you into an environment where you got to see the possibility and you
Mhm.
got to live through the possibility. And then you also
Mhm.
got to be the kid that lived in the house that was half under the ground. Um, those kinds
Yeah.
of things, just in the community
Yeah.
sense. You didn't have the same shack everybody else had. And the
Right.
snow blew
Right.
right over the top of yours. Just things like that. You go, what a what an amazing kind of point that shaped something. I've had guys on the show who said, I looked down the list at university and the first one I thought I knew what it was about was architecture. So that's why I was still in the A's. I never got to the D's or the C's or whatever else. And they've said to me, so I said, I'll give that a go because I kind of think I know what
Yeah.
it's about. And they're architects still, and they go, I had no idea what it was about. But I went, but that kind
Yeah.
of thing where it was, you saw him do it with his own hands. You saw,
Yeah.
all those pieces come together. That to me is
Yeah.
like golden.
I think also to that end, there's almost this like immigrant work ethic too. And while my parents aren't, immigrants exactly, but there is this sort of drive of work that if you don't do it, nobody else is, right? And so it's not like, and I think to that end too, like we were like camping essentially until we got the house done.
I
And
think
so
that's why I said, bless your
incredibly,
mother.
no, I know. And yeah, so incredible, it was a challenging time to be sure, because you don't want to be camping outside in Minnesota in the wintertime. So
That's
yeah,
where
no,
you
I
drill
think
holes in the ice and go fishing through them, you know? Like, yeah, no,
no, absolutely.
yeah. Yeah, how cool. So that sparked you,
Yeah.
obviously went and studied, and then into New York, did towers and stuff, and then
Yeah.
that thing across all the different climate zones. One of the things
Mhm.
that I find fascinating is, and it takes me right back to your agricultural history. If I'm designing something, say in another state like Victoria, yeah, so I'm in Australia, I live in Queensland. Victoria's another state. We're the same size as America as a landmass. So Australia and America are about the
Okay.
same size as a landmass, but we only have like about 5 or 7 states and territories. So when you look at that, you go, we just have bigger, chunkier states, you know, Texas, the size, they're all the size of Texas kind of thing, you know, boom, boom, boom. But we can
Yeah.
have quite different climate just within our own state. So like in Queensland, in the top of tropical northern Queensland, you know, you're in like big tropical storms and cyclone, we call them cyclones, but really heavy weather, and you know, all your wind ratings
Mhm.
and stuff like that are through the roof. You build everything out of solid concrete or cinder block, you know. And then you could
Yeah.
be down where I am, where it's subtropical, different wind rating, and then you could be way out west in our own state where it doesn't snow, but you kind of it does everything else. It's freezing cold,
Mhm. Mhm.
it's windy, you know, all those things. And then in the summer, it's ridiculously hot, and there's more flies than friends. You know, it's like it's that's but you
Yeah.
learning to design in those different climates. My thing comes back to, well, who are the people who do agriculture here? Because they're the ones who know how to thrive, not just survive.
Yeah. I mean, definitely an attention to detail with respect to climate, right? And I think there's so much that can be learned just from the vernacular structures, right? Of people have been building this way for, centuries or millennia in these climates,
Maybe
right?
there's a reason.
Oh, yeah, yeah, right, right. So yeah, we don't necessarily need to reinvent the wheel on a lot of this. I think also too, just looking at what materials are they using, right? Like here in Texas, for example, a lot of stuff is limestone because we have limestone, and really you travel down to Mexico and you see just like concrete, right? I mean, just lime and stuff like that because there isn't a lot of at least depending on the part where you're
Mm.
at, just like high-end materials or stuff like that. But they're just doing this beautiful sculptural concrete work that nobody in the US could touch, right? So to me, that's sort of the fascinating thing is finding out like materials and methods of how people are doing things and why.
Yeah, I think that's
Right.
fascinating. I think that's why, you know, all people who design, doesn't really matter what they design, need to travel and need to
Mhm. Mhm.
not just see it, experience it and feel it. And, you know, especially when it comes to architecture, you know, you can buy a knife and carry it with you and take it to multiple different places. It's pretty hard to do that with a house or a building. It's like, yeah, it's a
Yeah,
tiny home
yeah.
on a truck maybe, but it you know, architecture doesn't travel.
Mhm.
It's static. You go to it, and when you go to it, you actually get the bigger picture because you get the environment, you get all the pieces that come with it. Whereas we can buy something from anywhere and we can bring it to us,
Mhm.
and it's just a piece of something, not all of
Yeah,
something,
yeah.
you know?
And I think the best architecture really is site specific, right?
Mm.
Like it only makes sense in this one spot. Like you take it off there and or you replicate the design somewhere else and it doesn't really make as much sense,
Ooh,
right?
yeah. I totally agree with that. And one of the things I think that we have is, you know, a large homogenization of architecture. You know, like we look at trends, and you know, like take a skyscraper for example. In a skyscraper, you know, curtain wall construction on the outside,
Sure.
and so at some point in our quest for better costs, a shift in trends, we started curtain walling houses, individual houses with battens and stuff like that, because we could build a square box but put a curved end on it, or we could do these things with a cheaper way and then, use it as light filtering, whatever it is. But we take something from there and put it there. But we'll go through a trend that is like, we started out having this little chat before about mid-century. And, like the California mid-century homes and the desert homes where they're just a flat roof. Well, and what if it rains? And, is it site specific for if it rains? I remember talking with
I
Omar
think that
Gandhi, and he said to me he said, when you go and in Nova Scotia and stuff, when you go and design there, he says there's a wind load and there's a snow load, and it will
oh yeah,
determine what the
yeah.
architecture works like.
Yeah, no, I think, and I love mid-century, love the work. I think there also was maybe a bit of the hubris at the time where it's this machine for living that we don't necessarily need to account for snow
Yeah.
load or, direct sunlight, because we've got the air conditioning that'll simply take that away. And so hopefully there's been some realization the last 60, 70 years. I mean, I know that there has been of designing with climate and that in mind. I will say, I think, with regards to trends, one of the things, sort of the buzzword of the industry for the last 20, 25 years has been sustainability, right? And rightfully so, but I think to such a degree that there's so much kind of greenwashing with it that everything is sustainable these days. But I think probably going forward, increasingly, we're going to be talking about resiliency in addition to sustainability. I think,
Ooh.
I think the Palisades fire in LA really this
Yeah.
summer, I think that put a vulnerability in people's minds that they didn't really realize that they had, right? Susceptibility to wildfire. And so we're starting to see it from a code perspective. Come down the line of, okay, now we're starting to design for wildfire. Starting to see it with flooding, right?
Yeah.
Areas like I think Austin is a perfect example of that,
Texas
where we
flood.
have, yeah, I mean, right, there's tons of limestone underneath our feet, and like water doesn't quickly
Hmm.
filter through that, and increasingly like population density, right? So we're starting to push into areas that we probably weren't building on before. So, yeah, just a lot of this increasingly volatile climate, right? That
Yeah.
our houses need to be smarter with how they respond to that.
Yeah. Years
So,
ago, I had this conversation with the Australian Trade Commissioner in Los Angeles. So I went and saw the Trade Commissioner, and
mhm.
as you do, like I was in Los Angeles, and I went. I had something that I thought could be useful to the Australian government. Anyway, I went and saw the Trade Commissioner in Los Angeles, and he said to me, everything waits for regulation to be written for it to truly change. He said, you don't want to go off at this angle to find out you needed to be at this angle because you spend all your money and you're just slightly off the angle and legislation
Sure.
gets written and then you jump in. He said, so industry waits. And I'm like, yeah, okay, that's
Mhm.
really interesting. And he made this comment to me about Los Angeles. He said, so Los Angeles has this huge water infrastructure that is, and we're talking years ago, so maybe, I don't know, 30 years ago. Oh, no,
Okay.
it wouldn't have been. It would have been 20 years ago. He says every pipe in Los Angeles leaks. And if you looked at the amount of water that comes out of the reservoirs and goes into Los Angeles, um, there's the amount that they lose is just massive. He said, if there was a problem to attack, it would be that. And I remember sitting in his office, and you're down by Century City on in one of these big high-rise buildings, and
Mhm.
he said, So you look out there and you see, there's dry parts and there's green parts. He said all green parts are irrigated. And I said, so what would happen if it wasn't leaking, let's just say 30% of that water into the ground? What would that landscape, there'd still be irrigated parts, but what would the rest of the landscape look like? And he was like, oh, that's a really interesting question. I imagine just
Never thought
drier.
of it.
Yeah. And I said, well, drier, and would foundations start to move? What else would happen if we if we dried it out that much? Like it's one thing to get water to people's houses and give them the amenity. There's still, say, 30% of it landing in the ground and doing some kind of job. And you were saying before about that limestone, we put more roofs. And when we put more roofs, we put more concentrated water catchment. And then when we do that, we send that water to somewhere because we don't want it. And then we end up with, the rivers overflow. I've been in Austin with floods. I've been there. And Texas is
No, it can be
famous for
scary.
flood. But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I think there's got to be and I think we're trying to do it at some level with holding that water on site with retention ponds increasingly needing to do that. But it feels like we're on a very rapidly changing system, right? Just from a code perspective, from a climate perspective, from a design perspective, certainly nothing is static, here, probably elsewhere
We're
around
the
the
same.
US or elsewhere.
Yeah, we're the same. I look at it in one point and go, wow, it's really exciting. And on the other side, I go, AI, get your shit together so you can tell us what we need to know quicker. Because projects have a time frame,
Yeah. Yeah.
we have projects that we're doing that are being signed off under old code because they had a start point, and then they're going to be built in old code. Well, some of it'll get upgraded to new code, but some of it won't because, it was costed, it was built, it was, as a design build firm, I suppose you get to look at that and you go, well, if we've got a project that's 2 years long or whatever it is, at least you're very aware of the code shifting and being able to bring that to that building, to that house.
Yeah, no, to your point, I mean, there on some of the larger projects for sure, there's the risk of it being antiquated
Yeah.
before it even gets its certificate of occupancy, right? And I was just talking with someone in my office. There's this the new wildfire code, right? That's the book's like 100 pages, and then the city of added their own like amendments, which is another 50 pages. And so all of this stuff went into record as of like, I don't know, I think just like a few months ago, where all of a sudden now, like make sure, it's like I think every architect is scrambling a little bit to sort of get your drawings updated to, take that into account. And from what we see it on the construction side is really the cost of that.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons that we got into the construction side was really to control costs, control the margins, and this is something that, we're, probably adding another, 5%, and it's just like this little drip of everything that adds up that, contributes to the housing crisis, the affordability crisis
Well,
too, that we're
5% of a million's only 50 grand.
right?
Yeah, you've got that in the top drawer of your desk, don't you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And it's the 50 grand
So,
that sits on top of the other 50 grand that sits on top of the other 50 grand. And then the client says, so why is it 4.3 mil? Yeah.
yeah. No, it all adds up, unfortunately. So,
This part of it fascinates me, and I've spoken to a number of architects who are design build. I do a bit of public speaking, and one of the things when I talk to crowds who are from, say, the building industry, I start off with this statement, which I say, so this whole talk will be driven from the fact that designers and architects shouldn't be builders and builders shouldn't be designers and architects. So let's just get that clear right from the start, like this. And it's kind of me just trying to put a marker down so that there's a reference point. And then I totally
Sure.
agree with design build. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like I absolutely do. I go,
Well,
I think it
there,
makes so much sense.
yeah. There's there's some in the profession that would say, oh, this is like, this new trend of being design build, right? And I think what they're talking about is probably the Arizona school that, like, in the 90s really sort of kickstarted it and got it all going again. But I would say, look, the trend is not that architects are builders. The trend is that architects are specialists and not builders, right? Like Brunelleschi got the dome in Firenze because he was the one person that could build it, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
right.
you could go back to Vitruvius being a builder, Amenhotep being a builder, right? And you see this all the way through. Probably till Frank Lloyd Wright, right? I mean, Wright was a builder, testing
Yeah.
columns and really, rolling up his sleeves and doing that. And sort of, in the 60s, we decided that architects were really, number one, happy to shed liability. Right. And so anybody who could, take that off our hands, we were happy to let them do that. But then also too, I think as the, development of towers and high rises, now we're not doing everything. We're doing space planning, we're doing curtain wall design, we're doing, sequencing and all of this stuff. And I think at some level, the profession, like it, I think we sort of lost something in that. And
Mm.
so I think there's tremendous value to be gained from being a builder and understanding that. But I think it also does take, this idea of wanting to do something new, of continuing to find new things, new systems. You have to be a constant learner,
Yeah.
right? You
Yeah.
you can't really settle on what you know, or architecture is not going to be that fulfilling, I would say. So it's
I,
it's a give and take.
I think there's so much of that, and I get that liability thing as well. Like here, a builder, if they build a house here in Australia, they've got a 7 year like hard written warranty on that home. They're really
Okay.
liable for longer than that, just depending on what it might be. But they've they've every home has got to be built to last 50 years, which seems a crime when a house costs so much that 50 years just it's not even a lifetime anymore, like
Right.
it's like a half-life. Um,
Yeah.
and then also that thing around having the liability part to one part of it, like I've got some friends who well-known architects and they write quite a few performance solutions and they're really taking liability of their design work. A bit like Frank Lloyd Wright would. He'd be like, well, I think that'll work. And I mean, he got it wrong a lot, but
Yeah.
he certainly blazed a trail for people to get it right. But we're too scared to get it wrong. Maybe that's a good
Yeah.
thing, but we're too scared to get it wrong because we live in such litigious societies that
Yeah. Yeah.
if somebody's going to sue the builder's going to his company's going to decide whether he can sue us. That's the next
Yeah. I
step.
mean, it makes it incredibly challenging to do progressive architecture, right? If
Yeah.
especially if you're not a builder, like you better have a pretty good relationship with a builder
Mm.
if you're doing that. Just to your point, it is an incredibly litigious society that we're in that sort of keeps that stuff in check, unfortunately, at times.
Yeah, I think there's a balance in it, like sometimes yes we need it and then other times we don't need it. I've got a project at the moment that I'm handing over to the builder. I don't do any design build, but I have the builder with me from
Sure.
conceptual design
Yeah.
forward. And
Mhm.
I say, speaking with the builder yesterday, and I said, they were taking me through some things that they were doing with the client, just some stuff that was going backwards and forwards. And I went, oh, God, I feel your pain. I said, one of the party is kind of a bit, like I wouldn't say, but Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, like he can be either way with things. When he's against, he kind of flares up. He's like, it, he, I said to the builder, I said, I think it's often he doesn't feel understood. And so then
Okay.
in the design process, I always would take it all the way back and then bring it forward again, like you would in a
Okay.
sales process, try and find what didn't we hear, or what didn't we,
Sure.
where was the problem? Was it a
Hmm.
logical conversation, or was it an emotional conversation? Were we working with emotions, or were we working with logic? Which piece of
Yeah.
we, and
Yeah.
then coming back to that, and they were saying, like it's draining, and they're going to build, it's an expensive home. It'd be a beautiful home, but they were like, they they just want to get on and build it, but then that whole people management side of it, and they go, we don't want to end up in, we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's because we we don't know who we're going to be dealing with at critical points of it. It'll be the same
Oh, sure.
person.
Sure.
They'll look the
Yeah.
same, but they may act
Yeah.
very differently. And so,
Yeah.
it's pretty fascinating. And I haven't had a lot of clients like that. But they're like, like, no, we're very detailed, and we're being very detailed about all our contractual involvement and all those things, because they said, not that we think that we're going to have a problem, but if we do, we want to have a record of how we got to where we are.
You have to
Like,
wear many hats at times,
yeah.
right? Just from like psychologist to accountant to
I don't think you ever get to take the psychologist one off just quietly.
right? Yeah, no, it's like the funnel of knowledge that you need is just this wide open, never ending
Isn't
thing.
it?
But that's the I mean to me
That's the
that's
joy.
kind of the interesting part, right? Is this journey that you get to go on with, every client and every project, right? And I think fortunately for at least where I'm at with kind of the residential side, that journey is fun for, a year to 2 years as we're, through design and construction or,
Yeah.
slightly longer. But I don't really need to do the 5, 10 year journeys on sort of the bigger commercial projects,
No.
But
That's an interesting distinction, isn't it?
yeah.
Like if you can do it in, 18 months to, sort of like 30 months or something like that,
Yeah. Yeah.
it it maintains enough momentum. There's lots of discovery. There's always
Mhm.
a piece that's challenging in some way. There's something that keeps it moving in your brain, and you get to have the people that you're dealing with, and really enjoy that journey of
Yeah.
discovery. I always say to clients, the first part's discovery. Yes, we've got budgets and we've got guidelines and all those things, but we want to know
Yeah.
what you don't know and what we don't know. We're both learning
Sure.
here. Let's jump in
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
learn. And because if we don't learn the land well, we need to know the regs, but like if we need to learn the environment, and we need to learn
Mhm.
the land, the land, the air, the water, the sun. We need to learn all those
Yeah.
things for the specific spot, and then we need to learn you as people and how you want to
Yeah.
live in this specific spot. I think back to your dad again, and I go, it's just the perfect example of that. And you go,
Yeah.
but learning that about the people and them learning it about themselves is the magic. And then you get to draw the
Yeah.
pictures, you get to draw pictures of that stuff. And in your case, you get to build it.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. I think to your point, what is really to me, what is the fun part really is understanding the client. And like you said, everybody lives in each house differently. And a
Yeah.
case in point is a lot of times what a litmus test is like like where do you want the kids' bedrooms in relation to yours, right? Sometimes they're on the opposite end, like in the basement, and other times they're like right across the hall, right, or adjacent to
Isn't that just such a
you.
really interesting question? And then to go, and would that still work in 5 years' time? That's my question.
When your teenager's sneaking in
Yeah,
the window.
exactly. Do you know, there's one, like we use a lot of what you call, I think, do you call them Jellos windows, like louver windows? We call them louver. So they're
Oh yeah,
blades,
yeah,
yeah. Um,
yeah,
um,
yeah.
we use a lot of those in this climate where I am because we're subtropical.
Sure,
And
sure.
we use that and we use fixed glass often. Now, and
Okay.
we also will take a whole wall and just open it up with sliding doors, like completely.
Yeah.
We'll have what would that be? A 30-meter beam sitting in the
Okay.
ceiling, and we'll just pull all the glass back to one end. It'll be gone, or we'll slide it
Yeah.
back past the house. Yeah, shit like that. We do stuff like
Yeah.
that. I don't see a lot of that in Texas often, because I think the climate control is possibly too hard. Um,
Hmm.
with it, when we're doing that, we have this consideration, which is so. As a kid, I climbed out my window. I came in at 4. I did all those things, and I was lucky enough to have a window you could climb in and out, and I didn't, have a double-story drop or whatever.
Sure, sure.
Yeah, yeah, I was lucky enough for that. It wasn't an easy window to get in and out of, but I did it. And my
Yeah.
parents' bedroom was directly, my bedroom was here and their bedroom was there, like directly in front of it. And I'm like, the land kind of sloped away. So theirs was like maybe a story and a half, and mine was like just on the story where the window
Sure.
was. And I'm like, how the hell didn't they hear that? Well, now I think back, I'm like, how the hell did they not hear me coming and going? I can't have been that stealthy. And then you think
There's
about, my sister,
Mhm.
possibly because of my dad, I don't know, but my sister, her bedroom was, on the other side of their bedroom. So there was a bedroom in the corner, my sister's bedroom, it's like an L shape. And
Sure.
you couldn't climb in hers. There was no way you could
Sure.
climb in hers. There was no way to do it. You need a ladder.
For it's
Yeah.
like, all these things we don't realize until we're adults and we start having kids of our own and be like, wait a minute, wait a minute.
And how we
That's why that was.
misbehaved. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that side of it I find fascinating, And when I'm like designing for people, much like you these things
Yeah.
come up, and it's I always say to people, it's what we learn from very deliberate casual conversation. They don't
Yeah.
need to know it's deliberate. We're
Right.
discovering bits about them as we go. And the more that we can have them have their guard down and tell us their stories about things, the more we can gauge where things matter. But that thing around should the kids' bedrooms and where should our bedroom be is like such a classic.
Yeah, I mean, I think to your point too, better than sort of a litmus questionnaire of is this and this, it's so much better, dialogue like you and I are having,
Yeah.
for example, of hearing these stories and you get more nuances to it. And I think it goes to, what we were talking about before about just making this so specific, and Glenn Murcutt in Australia, right? There's few that do better,
Mm.
so specific architecture than what comes out of his office, right? I
Yeah.
feel like at some level that's kind of the goal for a lot of us is really just getting that dialed in on a site specific level, on an occupational level, personal level, climate level, so much stuff of just trying to get it dialed in, so to speak.
It's fascinating, like you say, with that the holistic approach they have to it, So Glenn Murcutt, obviously, I've never studied architecture because I'm a building designer. With that, I did do a couple of weeks with Glenn in a master class, and
Yeah, saw that.
yeah, in that was Absolutely fascinating. Not so much on, what you're learning to draw out of it or whatever. It's how
Yeah.
you're learning to expand your thinking to it. And Peter
Okay.
Stutchbury, again, just amazing architecture, and Richard LePellier, like amazing architecture. And that it's the thinking that they use,
Hmm.
and they're kind of like all disciples with
Hmm.
Glenn, but it's the thinking that they use to solve problems and to
Hmm.
enhance the built structure for people or for
Hmm.
animals or for whatever they're
Hmm.
doing it for. Um, that Yeah, there's a reason why those guys rose to the top of their professions, I suppose, because they use this thinking,
Hmm.
and it's how they approach every piece, every aspect of life. Glenn lives in a home he designed for one of his clients, where
Really?
his farm is, and he bought that farm from the estate. I'm pretty sure that's how the story goes. And so that home that he actually has on the farm, I've been to it,
Hmm.
was one he designed for somebody else.
I think I read that. Did he do an addition to that one then too? Like
Yeah.
it's kind of a long linear
It's two,
structure, is it
two,
not?
two
Yeah,
part, two
yeah,
pieces and some water tanks. Yeah.
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 No, like yeah,
And
yeah.
and and I remember sitting on the veranda with him on that place and saying, so if you didn't design it for you, what would you change? Like, because he didn't design it for him, he designed it for that place and that
Yeah,
client. And he said, well,
yeah.
as the house is built to breathe, naturally, he said, I wouldn't change anything with that, the way that is.
Yeah.
And he said, he very much had adapted to living in the house, as to what it was. He's His thing was is that because the structure worked so well in its environment,
Hmm.
it was an easy structure to adapt to live in. Um, and where it wasn't designed specifically around his living style, but because it
Yeah,
environmentally sat so well, breathed so well, picked up the
yeah.
light so well. It's got an amazing like fireplace that's built out of this, big plate steel and stuff in there that heats up and radiates heat through a whole part of the
Hmm.
house. Just
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, just he said it was a very easy house to adapt to for him to adapt to.
I mean, to me, that's fascinating that say we as inhabitants or our clients would change their lifestyle based on the house, right? I don't know if like this is almost like the opposite of what we're talking about, where like
Yeah.
this is the architect as fountainhead, right? Where I'm going to give you a piece of architecture and you're going to mold your life around that to do that. I don't know how many of our clients would be like, yeah, let's do that.
Isn't
You
it
know?
funny that, like in New Zealand, there was a guy, his name's Dr. Robin Congreve, and he was like a tax expert. And anyway, he built a home or had a home built, and it's a piece of art. Like the home is a piece of art.
Yeah, sure, sure.
And I remember a friend of mine worked with him, and I remember I'd come back so I used to work in the fashion industry. I'd come back from Milan, and while I've been in Milan, I've always looked at architecture my whole life, and it had an absolute love of it. And anyway, I was in the fashion industry, been in Milan, came home, and this friend of mine said, "Oh, look, Robin's house is under construction. Would you be keen to go and have a look?" I said, "Yeah, hell yeah!" And I go to this house, and I'm looking. I walk on site, do all the things you shouldn't do,
Mhm.
all those things. Have a look around. He wasn't there, so nobody really kind of was going to stop me. And I ended up at at a dinner, and Robin was at the dinner, and I ended up chatting to him about his house,
Yeah.
and I said to him, like, what's it like to live in something like that? And he said, oh, well, it's wild. It's an adventure, like it's not a regular house. The rooms are all different. You can drive the bed around the bedroom if you want. It's built for my art collection. So it's got all this art in it. And,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I'm like, part of it looks like the back of a big boat, and it faces out towards the water, and just all these things. And I said, oh yeah, I came over and I had a bit of a nosy at it. And he's like, oh right, like this. And I said, yeah, I did walk on site, nobody really stopped me. So I did have a bit of a wander around. And he's like, right, well, what did you think of it? And I said, oh, I just loved the size of the brick that you used. And he looked at me and he goes, really? And I'm like, yeah, I just loved it. I said, I'd just been to Milan with work, and I came back, and that brick that you used is almost, I would say, identical to the size of brick that they use there. And he said, it is like this. He'd seen this brick in Milan. He'd got hold of the brick and he'd brought it back to New Zealand. And then he got all the molds made and said, I
Oh,
want my
really?
house made of that brick. And it was like these strangers went boom and collided at that point. And then I realized that, like as he was saying, it's an adventure and all the rest and all these things that I'd never really considered that a house could be that. He was adapting to living in it. And
Sure.
he, would have this piece of art collection up and that piece taken down, and there were rooms to store that stuff in, and all those kinds of things. And it was my first kind of major realization that people lived like that. And he didn't know really what was baked into the architecture that he was going to discover either. So it was really fascinating, and I think that was like a big turning point for me in the depth of my thing a roof's kind of shelter, and yes, you can make it nice and function better or whatever,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
to actually treat it like a piece of art and live in it.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like there's there's some level of practicality that probably should be in there, but if the whole thing is based off of some formula or some grid of or some program that's filled out to the T, that's not particularly that
Yeah.
interesting, right? I mean that's maybe our sort of volume builders that we have here would crank that out. And university would say that's really not where the architecture is.
No,
That's not where the poetic side of it is, to be certain. So hopefully we're injecting that. To me, what is kind of the interesting part is a lot of times like the paradoxes that you have to resolve, right?
mhm.
I think we've seen this sometimes on our courtyard houses where how do you bring nature in and yet still like inevitably like the glove is not going to fit exactly, right? There
Yeah.
is going to be some molding of working around this stuff and yeah, I mean to me that's the interesting part. That's a fascinating part of working through the design.
I think
So,
that's other than learning the clients and the environment and the site, and that's the joy. That's the part that I go, oh yeah, yeah, like tip it upside down, shake it. What the hell can we do with it? And let's
yeah.
and you're not. It's a journey of discovery. It's not one of a final outcome. It's just a
Mhm.
journey of discovery. Would you love
Yeah.
to share some? I'd love you to share some pictures if you've got some there. Um, so
Yeah.
if you're not on YouTube, we're going to have a look at some pictures of
Yeah.
Daniel's work, and he's going to tell us a bit about them as we go. And I'm fascinated. I've obviously seen his work, so I'm fascinated for some of the backstories on these. And one of the things that I always think is the most important thing of any building is what was the brief? And
Mhm.
the brief defines whatever the craziness becomes. We go to places that we go, oh, this is nuts. Why was it built like
Yeah.
this? And you go, well, what
Yeah.
was the brief? And who were the
Yeah. Yeah.
occupants? Like.
Yeah, no, exactly. I'm gonna show just
So this
one
is in
project.
Austin? Yeah, cool.
Yes, yes, Austin, Texas. This is our Camp Coco house.
Yep.
And so young couple came to us, site that they were super excited about. And we quickly, realized why. So quite a big size lot, probably double or triple the size of an infill lot that we would have here.
Hmm.
Creek running through it, tons of trees. But we then very quickly sort of realized, those amenities also come with kind of the flip side, the challenges, right? And so with the creek comes the flooding, the
Yeah.
floodplain issues that
Yeah.
we have to resolve. And then Austin has the protected trees. Right. And
Mm.
so proximity to large trees, you need to stay out of the root zones. Additionally, we had certain easements or restrictions on the setbacks that we had to stay out of. So just a lot of what we thought was, this, walk in the park, so to speak, it became quite a bit more challenging than I think we initially went into it with. And so also too, the biggest one that we had to deal with was what we were talking about before about
Mm.
floodplain lots.
Mm.
And so the first issue, the step one really was given to us. Like we had to look like, can we even build anything here? Because
Oh, really?
if there wasn't a house there before, like you just bought a park. Like there's nothing, you can't build anything there. And there has been people that have sort of bought these, lots that they loved, but due to restrictions, like you can't build a house there. And so fortunately on this one there had previously been a house. There was a house there recently. But the
And
brief for us was this kind of young couple came to us, wanted a house, wanted kind of like a little guest house or, kind of detached suite, if you will, kind
mhm.
of pool. I think really liked a lot of the vernacular structures.
Yeah.
So not really looking for anything like real ostentatious, but also very I would say very informed on design, like as
Yeah.
far as material palettes, as far as a desire for a house to work with the environment. And so really, pretty sophisticated in that sense. So we worked up a couple options for them. And this is the image that I have up is sort of the front elevation that I'm showing.
Uh-huh.
The first restriction that I was going to say that really dictated all the subsequent moves was that the ground floor needed to be 4 feet above the grade,
Wow.
4 feet above grade, right? And
Wow.
so we're sort of starting with this platform of,
That
usually
you
we,
had to elevate by 4 feet
yeah,
to
yeah.
get off the ground, not out of the ground.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so normally, we like to probably have, more sort of, diversity or level change or sort of
Mhm. Hmm.
easing in and out. But in this case, we're, kind of given that restriction. So we looked at the question for us was really like, how can we build something that's elevated, something that's lightweight, and something that's, at the same time strong. And so we were looking at, nesting structures. We were looking at sort of historic wooden decks and
Yeah.
piers,
Right.
in New York City and elsewhere. Just to, try and get some insight into how are these things essentially doing what we want to do, which is lightweight, elevated, and lasting, in some
And
cases
all
like
for a budget.
centuries.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. And so, yeah, looking at this. So this is an image of the front facade.
And we've got a big cantilever on my right hand side, where that
Yeah,
I'd say it's the living room,
yes,
is
exactly.
cantilevered out as the ground sort of
Yeah.
maybe falling away, or maybe you brought the ground up to it.
So a little bit of both. And so that right side, the creek is right down below that,
Mhm.
kind of off the image. And then yes, we did have to mound up a little bit in the front just to kind of be able to get access into the house there. And then on the left side, let me back up a little bit. The shape of the lot is really pie shaped with the narrow part in the front, right? And so
Right.
it really opens up in the back, but it's challenging right in the front because you've got the easements that I
Yeah.
described, electrical easement on the left and the creek easement on the right. And then additionally, there's a restriction that says that the garage can't be in front of the house or even in the same plane as the house. And so we needed to somehow get the vehicles back behind, be able to
Yeah.
park the cars behind the front of the house. And so what we ended up doing was essentially lifting that second floor up onto steel support, steel angles. And now we've got a driveway that you can essentially drive under the house and
Yeah.
then park in the back. But it's actually as big as a lot is. It's super tight and restricting in the
Because of
front
that
of
pie
this.
shape. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, yeah. And so what you're seeing is this kind of the steps leading up to the front of the house, and then I think you mentioned these before, but the louvers that we have on
Yeah.
the front. So
Yeah.
this is south facing, and so it does provide these actually. What I think is one of the things I like about this is those louvers are all steel and they're hinged, and so you can actually open them up and
Nice.
properly clean the window and
Yeah.
do that. But yeah, so what you're seeing behind is the living room and then double height space. So we have about sort of I think it's about 26 feet where you walk in. It's just it's kind of small in footprint, but it feels quite spacious in there.
Yeah, I can
To
see
just
from
kind of
this
go there.
photo. Yeah,
Yeah.
really interesting, how like, the constraints actually start to form so much of what you can do. And just having to get through to the garage, the land sloping away to the right. And with that, you've got more of a flat plane on this side that you can get yourself in. Then the house has risen above that as well. And like, yeah, there's a lot of moving parts just in actually s- getting the house to sit somewhere and then getting enough footprint for the house to do that as well. What other
Yeah,
photos have you got?
what's that?
What other angles have you got of it?
Let me show you one in this is in the back. Let's see. Are you able to see that? Is that a
Not
new
yet.
image? Not
No.
yet. Okay. Let me,
Always find
oops,
these, yeah,
oops.
sometimes they skip through and other times they don't.
Okay. Let me,
I always blame Zoom for it, but I'm not sure it's Zoom's fault. Here we go. We're going to get one now.
yeah, you got it now. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Oh, wow.
So,
Yeah, okay. So another
yeah.
bridging. Yeah.
Yeah. This is so there was there's a lightness, a visual lightness throughout this project that we wanted to achieve. And this is not always something that you see in Texas, right? We have a lot of limestone, and so more often than not, you're going to see these kind of heavy
Mhm.
architecture, as you should, right? It's a local material. In this case, it really wasn't what we wanted to go with just because everything has to be elevated, right?
I was
So it's a
about
tremendous
to
amount.
say you're already 4 feet off the ground. So,
Yeah, it's a tremendous amount of energy to just lift this stuff up and
yeah.
support all of that. And so we decided to really embrace the conditions that we were given, which is, everything's going to be elevated and off the ground. And so here is actually what we did with this site was really find kind of four different nodes on the site where we could build. This was where, there's no trees, there's kind of open spaces, and then really connect these individual,
Yeah.
volumes
Yeah.
with connections, whether that be like a translucent walkway, in this case, kind of a skyway, or just open decking. Excuse me. And here is actually the connection you're seeing with this skyway between two different volumes. and the primary bedroom is now occupying this
Yeah.
volume, which is hovering over the outdoor pool.
Yeah.
It provides a really nice shaded outdoor space, and to be honest, this is the clients. I was asking them kind of after the fact, like, how are they using the space? Is it as we drew it,
As you
as we
planned.
intended? Yeah, yeah. Initially, and kind of surprisingly, they've said no, we don't use the primary bedroom or primary bathroom. And I was like,
What the hell?
what did we miss, right? Because this is probably the nicest primary suite that we've done, and the client Jane was like, "No, I told Josh that's too nice. We're only using that for photo shoots and homes tours. We'll go by." So she's sort of an influencer, and actually pretty well-known
Yeah,
food
right.
influencer in Austin, and so that's a lot of her life, and so she is taking using it, just not in the traditional sense that you and I, or
Oh,
how we
well,
certainly envisioned they would using it. But what they did say is actually the spot we use most in the house is not in the house, but
yeah.
actually this sort of covered outdoor decking area that's shaded from the spot above, and then
So
they love the
what they
pool.
use is what that it created by
Yeah,
being
yeah,
by
so
the Skyway being there. It's so
yeah, I
cool.
mean, one of the things that we really try and get in all of our projects is this idea of borrowed space,
Hmm.
right? That you can take from outdoor space, and I mean, and this adds a couple few hundred square feet
Yeah.
that's sort of free. I mean, if in the sense free of
Well,
using it, it's a lot, for gatherings. They've got an outdoor kitchen that's here, outdoor
yeah.
dining. I mean, it gets really great light in the morning and kind of later in the evening too. So,
That's so cool.
yeah, let's
I
let me
love
show
that. I
you.
love that piece, when, when she says to you that they don't use it. I'm like, I've been there, and that feeling of like, we talked about this for a year. What do you mean you don't use it?
Right, and I'm quickly looking through my notes, like, did I miss
Yeah,
something
that's what's
that
going
I
through
should
my brain.
have?
I'm like, oh shit, here we go.
But this is the image of the primary bedroom, and you can see this sort of protected tree on the other side. That's kind
Yeah.
of right outside the window. We love this idea of the exposed joist,
Hmm.
Douglas fir joist and ceiling, and I think this goes to the something that's very tactile, or in this instance, I would say it's tectonic, right? We wanted like a series of small members that would be made up to really give it strength, right?
Hmm.
Not unlike a nest or something like that. Instead of your monolithic walls, your sort of heaviness of that, it's intentionally very light. And there is this sort of a structural expression, or structural honesty, if you will, of seeing how this roof plays out.
Oh yeah,
And
like I'm writing myself notes as we're talking here, or
yeah,
you're talking.
yeah.
Yeah, well, it was the way you were just saying. It was this piece of the lightweightness of it, but of made of many parts, so like a nest, and then how do you create that into something that feels like, in this case, it feels like it's cradled in a tree,
Mhm.
and it feels like you're under good shelter. And then it's got vision. Like, often when I'm talking with people, I'm trying to discover. Some people like things to be up close to them and tight around them, and other people like this long vision and often look
Mhm.
for it in different parts of their life. Like, so where do they feel private? Where do they feel exposed? Where do they, you know, an example would be, I have a client, and she's a global businesswoman, and travels a fair bit, and we were looking at sites for her new home, and I said, one of the things that really strikes me in your current home is it's all set up with this long vision out of it.
Hmm.
You can see a long way, still very, very private, but you've got a long way. And this site that we looked at here and this site that we looked at here, we couldn't gain that out of those. The furthest you would look would be to just here. And I say just here, it
Hmm.
was still a reasonable distance.
Yeah.
And I said, if you had to describe yourself in business, would you say that you have long vision or short vision? And she said, well, long vision, of course, like she's built this empire and da 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 da. And I
Yeah.
said, right. And I said, and how much do you think is environmental of who you are? I said, before you buy either of these sites, I want you to go and um, find some spaces where you feel a bit more closed in and tell me whether those would be the right things for this vision piece. And I'm looking at this and I'm going, this nest in the sky gives you the vision down as well as the vision
Hmm.
out, like,
Yeah.
and yet you don't feel necessarily disconnected because the tree's hugging into you. So
Yeah.
the
No,
word
I
nest really stuck out.
yeah. I think this is a bit of tangent, but bear with me on this. There's the greatest architecture historian Vincent Scully was talking about the procession of entry to Frank Lloyd Wright's Falling Water, right?
Hmm.
And he compared that to Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, right? This is the
Oh,
magnum opus for both the masters, right? The master's work. And he talks about being on walking in and you get like a little glimpse of the house from a long ways away, right? And then it goes away. You just
yeah.
get that, right? And
Hmm.
you keep going on this path and it comes back and a
Hmm.
little bit more this time, right? And you keep going and you keep going and you gradually get a little bit more until it's sort of, the final is like you're standing in the in the river in the middle of the house, right?
Yeah.
And so it's this idea of kind of, I think of what you're talking about of sort of the long vista and then also just the sort of full immersion in that. And I think what we're trying to do on all this, and I've never forgotten that story, is
Mm.
is a mixture of some of this of both, of kind of the long range,
And the more tactile and up close,
immersive.
intimate, but immersive,
Uh,
yeah. Well,
yeah,
at Falling Water, like there's that piece where, you're inside there and you look down the staircase to the river below,
yeah,
and
yeah.
that's, basically the air conditioning unit for the place as well. But you look down into there and you realize that's the river below, and there's the
Right.
swimming pool down there. And then you get up and you float on those big balconies and
Mhm.
you can hear the river below, but you have to actually take yourself that next step to really engage again. But you stick your head over the side and you're right on the waterfall, like not even by looking,
Yeah.
just by sound and that tactility of it. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's such an interesting thing, with falling water. Every time you go there, you kind of discover something else that
Yeah, yeah.
you go, oh
I mean
wow.
that
Well, like
that's
it
certainly the
changes.
bar. I mean, yeah, the procession of the sort of the just the energy level,
Mm,
right? Where you
mm,
sort of go on when you're starting out and just like everything's quiet and tranquil and you hear the birds and then you sort of, like I said, you sort of get a glimpse of it in the distance too.
yeah,
That sort of cacophony of river when you're walking out there, right?
yeah,
When it's
yeah.
like full immersion, it's just this gamut of experiences that yeah, is really really incredible.
Something
So,
again, like, I don't know whether it was when we are recording or not recording, when I was saying to you, architecture is like static. It stays where it is. Only photographs let it travel. You've got to go to it. And
mhm.
you you couldn't you could imagine and you could visually see a movie of, but you couldn't feel. what that feels like,
Yeah.
especially going into falling water. And then I look in this room here again, and from downstairs, where this is like floating across, I was like, oh, cool. That's what I really love the fact, and like you were saying about the borrowed spaces and how that gets
Yeah.
used. And then now I'm up in here and I go, oh, wow, I feel it's big enough, but intimate
Hmm.
enough. And it's got the
Hmm.
interest in the ceiling, but the floor's really simple. And then
Hmm.
everything focuses me to look out the back. If you didn't have the beautiful timber ceiling, you might, if it was white, it might just put too much ceiling into the picture and into the
Yeah.
feeling of it. And so you start to imagine how this feels, and then what
Yeah.
does it really feel like from that?
Yeah. I think there's an element that we wanted to achieve on this, which is really taking the user through the site, right?
Mm.
And really kind of this, Bill Bryson walk in the woods type of feeling, right?
Yep.
Of going on this journey of this big site, which is really fantastic. And so hopefully there are these elements of, almost a treehouse type of feel
Yeah. Yeah.
of being elevated, but also, of being in a glade with kind of differing, openness and
Hmm.
filtered light coming in from above. I think ideally it'd be nice if you could walk kind of through the whole site just barefoot and not having to,
Yeah. Yeah.
being able of just this kind of easing
Very
minimal effort
grounded
between
feeling.
going inside and out. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I agree.
So
I agree.
let's see. Let me see. I've got one more image to kind of show here.
It's a fun project. It's it's so interesting.
Yeah. Just kind of
Oh wow. Yeah, this is that
walked in the
volume height.
yeah, yeah. Just kind of we just walked in the front door and we're standing in the living room now looking through the house. And kind of what I was talking about with the double height space or you know, hopefully some complexity of space, right? With the upper balcony
Yeah.
overlapping and creating these double height volumes, ethereal light coming in from above.
The dappled light on
And
the floor. Yeah. And then the
yeah,
vision
and
all the
it's
way through. Like on the bottom
100%.
right, I can see outside again, like that.
Yeah, yeah. That's a
And I can
little.
see east west. I can see outside on both sides as well. Like, yeah, it's fabulous.
I think so. One of the things, and going back to a little bit what I was talking about before, when you walk in, there is this little like kind of glimpse through the house to the outdoor
That's the
courtyard,
pool
right?
area and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so hopefully there's some, whether it's conscious or subconscious pull that's sort of pulling you through the house, outside into the covered area. Because in Austin it's a much more agreeable climate than
Oh, yeah.
Minnesota or New
Yeah.
York,
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
you have, right? Like we have 10 months a year that are really fantastic that this makes sense
Yeah.
to do here.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. That was
But
another thing that I fell in love with Austin about was it matches 7 climate zones in Australia, and while I live on the coastal climate zone, it's very somewhat similar. Similar enough. It gets a bit hotter in Austin and it gets a bit colder in Austin, but it's kind of within a temperate kind of value of it. And you've still got waterfront property, plus you've got hill country property. And so it does all that within this small region. And that's a little bit like where I live. There's a range of
okay.
hills behind us, and I live on a hill, but I see the sea. So we still have waterfront, but we don't have the intimacy of waterfront where it's lakes, where you see
Sure.
we have canals, but that's a whole nother thing. But then, the intimacy of having lakes, there's something very safe feeling about a lake compared
Mhm.
to the sea, that distance that it has in the sea.
Yeah.
Yeah, it always
Yeah.
needs a few islands, I think. Yeah,
I think
yeah.
there's this part, especially, rivers too, I think, right? Where just
Mm.
the difference between them, where sort of depending where your house is oriented on the river, is stuff always coming to you or is it always leaving you, right? Are you
100%.
always getting arrivals or is it just like, are you saying goodbye all the time? I think that like I love the subtleties of that. To me, and
And
the
where do you
sea is,
place that energy in the home? Like, the where's they're coming to you and where's it leaving you, like
yep, yep.
it's like with dams. I designed a house for some people here, and one of the things, they have quite a big dam, and there's about five houses that look onto this dam, and it's a
Okay.
natural waterway, but it's not super wide. And you always, whenever you look to your left out of their house, you get that it sort of runs on a bit of an angle and it always goes to dark. It never,
Oh,
that
okay.
end never really gets lit up. And so
Really?
it's always like a
Yeah.
bit of a mystery journey that goes that way.
Uh-huh.
But it's a really beautiful feel because there's dappled
Uh-huh.
light through trees, but that's always the dark end of the dam. And then, they live somewhere near the middle. And then, what's their vision like down the other side of the dam, where it
Sure.
captures a whole lot more light at different times, just because of the openness of the foliage. And that
Yeah.
part of, choosing that journey,
Hmm.
you'll wake up and you'll see this. You'll be in
Hmm.
your office and you'll see that. And then this is how where you'd entertain from here. Um, just
Yeah.
again, all those things. And it's all designed around what that, because the actual space that we were able to design, and we were pretty tight. Even though we had a lot of land, we had a tight building envelope.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
with it was like, how do you get that and how do you engage with it and then create mystery and adventure, and
Yeah.
how do you keep the mind active but not overactive? That water rushing to you or water rushing away from you,
Yeah.
big difference between rapids and the Mississippi, like.
Right. I mean, I think I keep going back to what we were talking about with falling water, right? And if I
Mm.
recall, sort of the entry is water coming at you,
It
right? You
is,
sort of
yeah.
on that
You're
side,
on
right?
that
And
side.
you kind of go through the house, and then, but
Well,
a lot
if
of
you come
the,
from the visitor center, you're definitely coming at the flow of the river.
yeah, yeah,
And you come
yeah,
down and across the bridge and then kind of up the path to the front door. But if you came
mhm,
from, we'll call it the servants' quarters, the staff
yeah.
quarters, you come down under that stepped walkway. And that's quite
Yeah.
different as well. I remember my first trip there just going, okay, so I was entranced, of course, but I wanted to discover all the different ways you got to the house
Yeah.
and felt the house. And certainly when you're up in those living areas and stuff and over the waterfall and the water's running down the creek away from you, it's got a magical feel. Oh, yeah. Every site has the ability to not, yeah, well, every site either has the ability to have something manufactured into it, or if it naturally has it, how do you get the best from it and what will the best
Mhm.
be to suit the people? You imagine somebody,
Yeah.
I don't know what the craftsmen were like, but if they were particularly, like nervous or high energy, frenetic kind of people, that place could have driven them insane. Like
Oh, yeah.
just all that power running underneath you all the time, and it's certainly very different from what they did in Palm Springs.
All right.
You know?
Yeah, yeah, no. No, I think that's an interesting thing, right? Just so much white noise that you're not
Yeah.
like necessarily having conversations at that. Like it's so powerful
Yeah.
at that level. But
I have never
yeah,
been to
yeah.
falling water in the snow.
Oh yeah.
I've never done that,
Mhm.
and that's something I'd love to do. It's like in the middle of Australia, you have Uluru. People may know it as Ayers Rock, but the big rock in the middle of
Okay, yeah.
Australia. And there's another set of rocks right near there, but called Tatakucha, or the Olgas was what they were
Okay.
originally, like called by the white settlers. And the Olgas, I remember going out there, and the Olgas is where I went to first. So you could see Uluru, but I drove to the
Mhm.
Olgas and went, I want to discover these things because they're so interesting looking.
Mhm.
And came away from there and went, wow, wow. Well, I can't imagine anything could beat that. And then got to Uluru and went, oh my God. Those Olga things, yeah, like Tatakucha, as opposed to Uluru. And when I was out there, it didn't happen for me, but I saw photos of it when it rains,
Oh,
and
really?
the
Yeah.
rock just sheds water off it. And I have this thing, like it doesn't rain out there very often. I have this
Mhm.
thing that, people will say, hey, it's raining in Uluru. Can you get here this like in the next
Really?
2 days kind of thing? And you can't drive there in 2 days from pretty much anywhere other than there,
Yeah.
because it's so remote. But yeah, can you get a flight into Alice and drive the 5, 6 hours, or it might be more, down to Uluru and still capture rain just cascading off this rock, and the immense
Yeah.
energy that that rock has in its landscape? It's ridiculous. Like
Yeah.
as say, you can't even imagine the physical energy that it carries. Um,
Oh,
and
yeah.
then to see it in different climatic conditions with rain,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
it, it,
I
I
mean,
think it only
so
rain or dry. I don't think it has anything else.
there was a professor of mine would say in school, like, never worry about your building being too boring, right? Because that, like, the environment is going to make it interesting. The environment is constantly changing and adding this element of interest to it that at some level, all you need to be is just like a canvas, just a white
That's
canvas up there to capture that, you know? I thought that was always an
it's a
insightful
well,
thought
it's a
on that.
great perspective to take any project and go, okay, so is this all about the building or is it all about the landscape it sits in? Or what
Yeah.
portion of what is? Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Um, I have a last question for you, which is
Yeah.
around, I wanna ask something around the sustainability of architecture, and also with that, what do you think we should be doing in the next, like, let's say 5, 10 years to shift the needle on making things not just more sustainable, but more livable? We live with trends, and the trends kind of pull us in certain directions, and that
Mhm.
could be materials, it could be whatever. So, what's your thoughts on that? And if somebody was starting out in architecture and they were looking, and what would be something you go, well, not what would have you done back when you started out differently, but with what we have in our hands now, what would be the things that you'd say, you know what? I think you should look at this as, don't take it out of your purview, but for these reasons. I have a list of ones that I love, so I'm keen to hear yours.
No, no, good, really good question. I think as we touched on before, I think increasingly our houses need to be the ground at which the metaphorical ground on which we're designing them is moving pretty quickly. It's shifting, right? And I think that our houses from a resiliency standpoint need to be more dialed in, if you will, or more tailored. And so I think with that, certainly in some zones, right? If it's, wildfire stuff where it's, cementitious exteriors you saw in the house that I showed, pitched metal roof, so those embers hit on it and can bounce off, all the way to, responsiveness to flooding, right?
Mm.
Where areas are flooding more and our houses are gonna get more water than they were before. So it's a responsiveness to that. So I think, yeah, just in general, just kind of understanding that the environment that we're living in is changing quicker than than it has at any point in our past, and continuing to get our houses to respond to that.
Mm, I like that. I do like that. I think, yeah, like we can't predict the future, but we can certainly have some great markers that we're working towards. And we know that, call it climate change, call it whatever. As you said, metaphorically, the ground beneath us is moving, and that
Yeah.
we see it here, just the difference in, and maybe it is a cycle, I don't know, but if you'd lived, I always like to talk to a farmer who's about 80 years old, who's never lived anywhere else but on this farm, and when you can do that, they'll tell you, they'll look in the sky and they'll go, it's going to rain at 3 o'clock. And you'll be, oh, bullshit, there's not even a cloud. 3 o'clock.
Right.
It's raining.
Yeah.
But that thing of being so in touch with their environment, and a long game of environment. And that when those guys say to you, yeah, things have changed, it's drier than it's ever been, or it's whatever, it's this, it's that, you go, that's when we should really be listening. Well, not when, it's part of what I really listen for, and we should be
Yeah.
listening for, because those people have they survive from, not survive, they thrive with the land. And we're so far from that. But you said in that, when in the house, the thought of just walking through that whole, all the grounds barefoot, and that feeling of truly engaging with nature and having nature as part of your journey. I think that that's something that COVID brought back to people by locking us up and all those kinds of things, was the need for that. And then, so how do houses, and we'll go back to falling water, the flagstone floor throughout falling water, and the rock that they used to picnic on is all part of that living area. And, you go, he brought some of it to it and he kept some of it there to work from. Like you said before about the house, you brought some of the landscape up and took some of it, cantilevered over some of it. It's this play of keeping you engaged, whilst keeping you, maybe somewhat at arm's length. I interviewed a guy, Cam Leverett. He is the CEO of Plungy Pools. And Plungy, do you know them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they're an Australian company, a couple of concreter and a builder, and got together and decided to do these. And Plungy I think they're in Dallas. I'm pretty sure they're in Dallas, is where they've headquartered themselves for America. He was saying to me, one of the things that they do with their pools is they have the ability to just ask for it. They offer it as an option, a valve. That means that it's a water reservoir that will run your sprinkler system or a pump out hydrant for your house protection, or your neighbor's house protection, or whatever else. Yeah. And you go, the last swimming pool I designed didn't have one of them.
No, I think it's a brilliant idea of taking something that's really off the shelf, right? It's this precast container, and yet having the ability to have this be like a cistern on your own property, and getting this multi-use access of it, where you swim in it in the afternoon and water your plants out of it.
That's
it. In the morning, right?
And if you're in a fire zone, the sprinkler system on your roof starts running from it first, or whatever the system is. It's that borrowed space idea again. And then what are we not using the resources of that we have, by just a bit more thought? And when Cam said it to me, I'm like, yeah, right. Well, that sounds like a great idea. It's like, Seriously, you've got, 30,000 liters of water sitting there. Of course, it's a great idea. And, I was telling
Yeah.
somebody and they said, oh, you'd pump that out pretty quick. And I go, yeah, but better than not pumping it at all.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It probably buys you enough time for the fire trucks to get there, right?
maybe,
And
maybe,
yeah,
and
yeah,
maybe not. But I'll tell you what,
yeah,
it would buy you some. It would buy you
yeah,
some, and that's
yeah.
where you go. Oh wow, that's a really interesting thought. We're doing a project where we've got a big in-ground natural pool, so it's all naturally filtered,
Okay.
and we've got a gum forest behind us. We're not in a fire zone, but we're on a big, large open acreage farm. And I was talking to the landscape architect, and I was saying I had this chat with Cam, and anyway, I said to him, "So, what kind of system could we have with that big pool?" Because it's got like waterfall and all kinds of things. It looks like a natural
Yeah.
watering hole is what it will look like.
Mhm.
What kind of system can we have in there that could be used for any firefighting around this home? And that, he's like, I told him I was talking to Cam, we're going to have a lot more water than that. And he's like, it's a really good point. It's a really good point. We could do that.
Yeah.
We could just do that with our pumping system. And I'm like, let's do it.
Yeah.
Like,
I think, I mean, to that end, one of the things that we're seeing here, and we did on an earlier house, was use that water to pipe it through your concrete floor, right? And so now it's like this heat sink.
yeah.
Now it like heats and cools your house using that. I love the idea where that pool can do so many more things than just sit there and never get used because you never take a swim in there, right?
All you do is
So
put
I think,
chemicals in and clean the damn thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so many opportunities for that, just like this duplicity of tasks that like you said, increasingly we're gonna need to do that. We can't afford to just have single use kind of
Yeah.
dumb things in the house.
Yeah. I think
So,
I think that, that thing, yeah, as you said, resilience, and resiliency is going to be like a major part of what we should be looking towards. And so for all you newbie like architects and designers and stuff out there, put it on your list. I have a little list of have I been rigorous enough, and resilience would go on my list of. So when any design, how do I break it before I present it? Like how many times can I break my own design? It's not about getting the perfect design. It's about how many times can I break it to get something more from it. And it doesn't really matter
yeah.
what that is, but is the resiliency built into it, what
Mhm.
happens if the power goes out and you don't have mechanical air conditioning? What happens if, you know, how will this house be? How will it live?
Mhm.
How will it protect its occupants? Yeah. But that
Yeah.
resilience part I really love. Really love. Man, what a great conversation. I've so enjoyed this.
Likewise.
Felt like I've learnt tons. Got a big page of
Yeah.
notes. It was really fun, man.
Yeah,
I'm
great talking with you too, Adrian. Thank you for having me on here.
I'm so
So,
looking forward to publishing this, and I'm looking forward to getting to Texas and coming and hanging out and eating some barbecue probably, I'm thinking, and then also going and visiting some projects without those fingers being sticky. One of the things I
yeah.
love most is to go somewhere and go into a building site, like going to site visits. Um, I'm,
Mhm.
I'm, I'm excited to see finished homes, and I'm excited to go to studios. So I always visit studios because I like to see the engine and the hub and the mechanics of something. But then
Yeah.
going to a site when something's under construction,
You like seeing how
that
the
rings
sausage
my
is made,
bell.
so to
Yeah, that rings my bell.
say.
Yeah.
Well, man, yeah, we've got certainly a plenty of those opportunities. So I'll be in touch with you via
Yeah.
email if you have any interest.
Oh, don't worry.
Love to show you around.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll be in touch for sure, man. Absolutely.
it's great.
Go and have a wonderful evening. I'm going to go and have a
Thank you,
great
sir.
day in the sunshine.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank
Cheers,
you.
buddy. Thank you for tuning into our conversation. I hope it left you both informed and inspired. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen, and please don't hesitate to share your design thoughts with me. It's always a joy to hear from you. If you're like me and crave a deeper dive into design thinking, coupled with a love for travel and adventure, consider one of my architectural adventures. Join me and some of my wonderful design friends and embark on a journey of a lifetime. Apply for an unforgettable design experience at adrianramsey.com. With our clients spanning the globe, I firmly believe behind every great project are great people. If you're a great person and seeking to turn your dream into a reality, I'd be honored to design your home with you. Why not join the ranks of our exceptional clients and let's make your heart sing? Reach out to me at studio@ardesignhouse.com. That's studio@ardesignhouse.com, and let's get a conversation going and make your heart sing.